Hello.
Turn off your cell phones. Please. All right. Starting in 10. Hi, and welcome to Answers News for Monday, February the 3rd, 2020. I'm Avery Foley. I'm here with Roger Patterson and Dr. Gabriella Haynes. We're glad to be here with you again this first episode for February. Can't believe we're already into the
I'm
second
glad
month.
to be here alive.
Yeah.
I
So
missed
last week you weren't here. Why weren't you here last week?
I had a little gallbladder infection. It was throwing a hissy fit, so I was on
Little?
the couch. Yeah, so glad to be back and recovering from that.
Yes, we're very glad to have you back. That didn't sound fun at all.
It was not. I won't compare it to having a baby here in front of these ladies, but
Good.
I sure felt like it.
You just don't get the same return for your work.
No, I don't.
When you,
I'll use that joke with the guys. And
Okay,
set it
yeah.
aside with you.
Doesn't make sense
Right.
with them.
well, we're glad you're here and you're feeling at least a little better.
A little better,
upright,
yep.
as you said earlier today. You're upright, so we're making progress.
Upright and alive, so you're good
Ready to
go.
roll.
We're
Yep.
thankful for that.
Yep.
So while we wait for people to jump on here, talk about a couple things going on at the Creation Museum and the Ark Encounter. The first one is our Explore camps, which are day camps we offer here at the Creation Museum. This will be our second year, I believe, doing those. And they're 3 or 5 day camps where the kids get to do hands-on science. They get to learn about a whole host of different sciences, astronomy,
lots of different topics.
forensics, different topics. One of the camps is even a 3-day forensics camp,
Yeah.
which is really unique. I don't know where else you would even be able to find that, let alone from a biblical worldview perspective, taught by an actual forensic scientist. So pretty cool.
Yep, I'll be there teaching the chemistry and a few other components. So
Nice. If you want to meet
the-
Roger in person,
get the kids to blow stuff up safely. That's always my goal. We blow stuff up, but we do it safely.
hey, as long as it's safe. Awesome. Let me see if people are getting on here.
Yeah, I have
Be
people
popping
here
up
from
soon.
Wisconsin, Sweden,
There we
UK,
Salem, Oregon, Fort Worth. I assume that's Texas.
Canada, New Zealand, South Carolina,
UK, Australia, Wyoming.
Channel Islands.
Yeah, so if that's something that your child would be interested in, definitely jump on creationmuseum.org/camp. They'll probably fill up pretty quickly, unless you want to register your child early to make sure they're not disappointed. Yeah, as soon as my son's old enough, he's going to be going to the camp. So
Yeah.
he's got a few years, he's only 3.
I
but-
did have to cancel our Explore Chemistry Day last week, which was Wednesday when I was half dead. So sorry about that if you were scheduled for that, but we'll get it again.
You can't teach chemistry half dead.
No.
Good to know. Good to know. The other event that we wanted to highlight here happening is our Answers for Women conference, which is very rapidly approaching. Now that we're into February, March is going to be here before we know it. That's towards the end of March, the 27th through the 28th at the Ark Encounter, talking about truth, uncovering the lies we believe. So a lot of the sort of popular things that have crept into the church, into Christianity, but are really, they kind of sound biblical at first, but when you really look at them, they're not. They don't follow what God's Word teaches accurately. So they're going to dive into a lot of those topics. I love Answers for Women. I go every year, and I always learn so much. So I really encourage you to register.
That's some great new speakers this year with Kay
yeah.
Arthur and
Yeah.
Phil Johnson and Justin Peters and others.
As well as some of your favorites from past conferences.
Yep.
So definitely want to register and attend and join us for that. The other thing is, because it's February, so February is the best month this year. Because not only was it my birthday yesterday,
Yes,
Yay,
and
happy
I forgot to tell you that
birthday.
yesterday when I saw you. Sorry.
that's okay. You were, yeah, it's all right. It's also the month that our baby is finally due.
Yay.
So I had to share a baby picture, this 3D picture we got of the baby just a couple weeks ago. So we're finally into due date month. So 19 days till the due date, the count is on. So I may or may not be here next week. We'll see. So yeah, so February is an awesome month. I'm really excited about that. So I just thought I'd give everyone a little baby update because I feel like I've been pregnant forever.
Yeah.
And people are probably
That's the
wondering when
feeling.
I'm ever going to
Yeah,
give
that's
birth
the
to this
feeling.
child. Sometime in the next 2 or 3 weeks, we'll have the baby. So there you go. All right, so we got lots of people on here, and we will get started with our first kind of fun news item here. Teacher gives anatomy lesson in a full bodysuit that maps out the human body in sharp detail. So this is teaching anatomy to 3rd graders to a whole new level.
Whole new level. Okay,
Oh,
I
yeah.
taught biology for many years, and I promise you I never did this when we were talking about body systems and things for my high school students.
Yeah, apparently some of the third graders, they thought it was pretty cool, but some of them kind of like, there was a mixed confusion, shouts, applause, and some kids covered their eyes.
Aw, that's cute.
This is not a totally new idea. Some of you who are older like me might remember back in the 70s, 80s, 90s, there was a character who showed up on different PBS shows and had a program called Inside Story on PBS. The character's name was Slim Goodbody. And basically he'd show up in different unitards that are painted with different muscle groups or different organs, and they'd talk about all those things. So it's a very visual way to help people
Help you understand. This is where
Especially-
the heart actually is in your body, or the lungs or whatever.
Especially kids, because they learn a
Yeah.
lot from what they see. So
Yeah,
that's
definitely more memorable than just looking at it on the
right,
page.
and reading, yeah.
So, so maybe this is a good idea for you.
I'm gonna just not do that, ever.
You're gonna drop that.
Never. But if you wanted to learn more about that, teach your family. We have some great resources for the older kids. Dr. Menton's set here on all the different parts of the body, dealing with the different systems of the body, cells and tissue and respiratory system and others. Goes through it with a really fine-tooth comb, using models and interacting with other students who are there. He's teaching, and great for the older kids. And for younger students, middle school age, we have Dr. Mitchell's whole series on anatomy and walk through those systems, and the rest of those, even after his passing. His wife is continuing to work on those, and they'll be released eventually in the future, Lord willing. And great resources to teach your family about how God's created us in such an amazingly intricate way, even more than these bodysuits could ever show.
And if you want to supplement it, I'm sure you can find the bodysuit on Amazon probably. And you'd be a cool homeschool mom who shows up at co-op in the bodysuit. All right, so we'll jump into our actual news items here. World's oldest fungi found in fossils may rewrite Earth's early history. So again, forget everything you knew about the evolution.
Don't we see this headline every
Fungi.
week?
I think we do.
It's maddening.
Last week,
Everything you know is wrong now.
yeah, last week we were rewriting again, and then now rewriting again. And
Yep.
I know that rewriting and again
Probably
together.
next week we'll do something too.
Yep, we're gonna rewrite something
So it's
else.
talking about how this particular group branched off from animals more than 1 billion years ago, which apparently means that we're more closely related to fungi than we are to plants.
Yeah,
So
absolutely.
if you-
so if you wondered, if
It
you
just-
like, if you had
Yeah.
a banana and a mushroom,
Yeah.
which one am I more similar
Those,
to?
The mushroom.
those hairs
Mushrooms.
here might be fungi related, you know, so.
But apparently there's a large gap in the fossil record of hundreds of millions of years where they just kind of disappear. But based on these new studies, they're thinking they might have found some fossils that kind of help fill in those gaps and help them to figure out what they were doing during those hundreds of millions of years where they
And it's really not surprising that we wouldn't find a lot of fungi in the fossil record, especially the majority. We see mushrooms pop up above the ground, but the majority of the organism is under the ground, this structure called hyphae that's spread out. And they're really, we wouldn't expect them to be preserved to a high degree. I've seen,
Very soft,
Yeah, I've
yeah.
seen petrified wood fossils where you can see fungus trails inside of them and things, but they would be decomposed pretty rapidly in those environments. Again, they'd have to be preserved very dramatically in some type of flood event to be able to preserve that. The substance that they're looking for, what I found most interesting, and you've done some work with this as well, that they're using these various analytical tools to detect the chemical compound chitin so that they can confirm this isn't just some fuzzy mass. Chitin's only found in fungus, and then we also see a similar biochemical form of it inside of insects, one of which is crawling across the desk.
Yeah,
Yeah, we have a little friend today.
We have a friend. Hi.
And
Hi, stink bug.
so that chitin material, using these different techniques, they can detect that, and you've done work with that.
Yeah, I have done some work with that, and we have seen in insects, chitin in insects using SEM, S-E-M, and it's really cool to see the whole structure in the insects. It's a little bit bigger than a fungi, but yeah, which is interesting because they're dating here 715 million years old, and it's still the chitin, it's there.
Yeah,
preserved.
they can still chemically detect and
Yeah.
detect it through other, use
Yeah.
a accelerometer and other things to detect the chitin. So
Yeah.
again, we see things preserved for hundreds of millions of years, substances that before would not have been predicted to
Right.
last that long.
And it's
Right,
even
so
like a
pointing to
surprise
a
for
young
them,
age, not an old age.
for them to be still preserved after so many millions of years.
The fungi puns are starting to roll in over here on
They
the
talking
Answers in
about me?
Genesis feed.
Oh, they invited me to a party because they knew I was a fun guy, right? Sorry.
Oh, I just got
that
it.
was for
Oh,
all the-
man.
Oh, that was for the
Yeah,
Bodie
you know,
fans.
because I'm
Puns
not,
don't work
I'm
in
Brazilian.
Brazilian, yeah.
Yeah, so like fungi,
Portuguese
fungi.
and
And you were
English
like
puns.
talking about like puns and everything. I'm like, what is that fungi? I'm like, ooh, I got it now.
you got
like,
it,
after
hey.
like 30 minutes.
All right, we got that one in for the
you go.
Bodie fans.
Oh, yeah. All right. Next one, again, speaking of fossils, giant thunder lizard dinosaurs may have walked on their front feet only. Findings
Okay,
reveal.
picture that in your mind right now.
That was so weird when I was reading this paper and
Dinosaur
trying to
doing a
picture that in
handstand.
my mind. I'm like,
Because these
it's
are the
kinda
giant,
weird.
like, think like the big long neck dinosaurs. That's the ones they're talking about.
Yeah.
Brontosaurus, the sauropods. Picture one of those walking on its front feet with its like back feet and tail in the air. It's
And just one thing, they were huge and very, very heavy. Dozens of tons.
very heavy, yeah. Like
So it's just funny to see.
So think about that. That's what the headline gives you, the image when you.
But that's really
not really what they're talking
what they're
about
talking
as you
about.
read through the article.
So they're analyzing several different trackways. I think they talked about 3 different trackways.
Found in Texas.
And their claim is that we see the manus pads, the front feet, versus the pes, is the way they talk about it in examining the different foot patterns. And when we see the 4 feet patterns, they're much more indented into the material, and the back pads, the pes tracks, are not as indented. And so the presumption here by this interpreter is that they were walking on their front legs. But that's possible, but it doesn't seem reasonable.
Yeah.
And there are certainly other ways to explain what's happening there.
And they come up with a couple suggestions. They say, well, maybe the rear limbs didn't support as much weight, so in certain materials, only the front, the manus, would leave tracks, or maybe the creature was swimming, and so you're only getting the front ones, not the back ones.
Whoa, why would a dinosaur be in a swimming environment
Yeah, a
leaving
land
tracks?
animal.
That's a good
Oh,
question.
Maybe there was a flood or something. So we can
Yeah.
imagine during the growing stages of the flood, as the
Mm-hmm.
waters are covering different areas, how giant creatures like this would have been paddling through the water, trying to maintain their footing and trying to
Escape,
move
yeah.
and escape. So there are some reasonable conclusions that even from a biblical perspective we can draw out from this.
Yeah, and understanding that when we look at the fossil record, we're not really, for the most part, looking at life as it was.
Yes.
We're looking at very unique conditions when there was a catastrophe, and so you're not necessarily looking at just a day in the life of a dinosaur when you find these tracks.
That's the worldview.
You're- Right, yeah,
That's
so
the
it's a
difference.
worldview difference of
Yeah.
whether you start with the secular evolutionary worldview or the biblical worldview to explain the fossils. So you have to keep that in mind when you're reading these.
Which is interesting because we have to have that in mind. If you have different worldview, you're gonna have different interpretation. The data is there. It's the same track, the same fossil, the same material. It's just different interpretation because of the worldview.
And ultimately, I mean, no one was there to watch the dinosaur put those tracks
Yeah.
there. So
There's no way we
your
can
interpretation-
answer this through observational science.
Right.
It's going to be
Right,
an
yeah.
historical
Historical,
interpretation
yeah.
regardless. And again, we've got great resources on dinosaurs, Dinosaurs for Kids, Dinosaurs of Eden. There's a Dinosaurs for Little Kids book that would help you understand a lot of those things. I would venture to guess most of our audience would even enjoy this Dinosaurs for Kids book.
It's a fun
because-
book, yeah.
It's a great book with
Has a
great,
lot of good
great
pictures.
pictures.
A lot of detail too.
Yeah.
That I think you'll find pretty fascinating. All right, so this one comes from LifeSite News. Trump administration announces action against California for forcing churches to fund abortion. So we've talked multiple times on the show about stuff going on in California, religious freedom issues with them forcing churches and other groups to do things that go against their biblical beliefs or their conscience. So this is just kind of another example of that. So the current administration, the Department of Health and Human Services, it has announced that California is basically violating federal law by trying to force churches to fund abortions through their health care plans. That goes against the Hyde Amendment and the Weldon Amendment. And so they're basically saying you need to stop doing that, trying to do that to these churches, or else you may lose some of your federal funding.
Yeah, and this is often cased as the Christians are trying to impose their religious views on science and on healthcare. But really, all California here, all they're doing is imposing their religious, anti-God, baby-killing attitude on others as well. And so as much as they want to frame it as a civil rights issue, that what they say, women's health care is a right, and we should have that right to be able to have an abortion and even have the government pay for it as a human right. They're imposing a worldview, a religious view on everyone else around them.
But what about the baby girls' health care? Because they're the ones.
If it's women's health,
if it's a women health,
half of the victims are women, girls,
what's going on? What's going on with the baby girls?
The other thing to remember here is it's only possible for them to bring this case. This is the Office of Civil Rights. That's part of the human HHS. And the only reason they can do this is because of this Weldon Amendment and the associated Hyde Amendment that have to be renewed every year or periodically by the Congress to continue this protection. If the legislators ever change to the point where they would repeal those amendments, as we've heard many current candidates in the presidential race talking about, all of those protections would be gone.
All of a sudden, it's not illegal in California.
Yeah, they're not grounding this in a constitutional right. They're appealing to this, and it's just another example of how these legislative acts are not going to bring about any final resolution to this. It's a heart issue.
Yeah, absolutely. And the way that changes is like, it's great for people to be fighting against and trying to get these good laws passed and things like that. That's great. But like you said, ultimately, that's not where our hope should lie, because as soon as the government changes and you get a new government in, well, they're just going to undo everything the government before.
Right.
We see that happen all the time. They get a law passed in a state and then the governor just vetoes it. Or, you know, you get a change in government
that's just
and all of
happened
a
in
sudden.
Virginia.
So
that's the persecution.
that shouldn't be our hope. Our hope should be in the gospel of Jesus Christ, because it's what changes hearts and lives and helps people to reorient their thinking when it comes to the unborn. So ultimately, that's where the change happens. It happens with people having their hearts changed by the gospel.
Let's remember that the gospel
government.
is the solution to these things, not more laws.
Absolutely. All right, this next one also about religious freedom. Franklin Graham responds after UK venue canceled for incompatible LGBTQ views. So most people, of course, will be familiar with Franklin Graham, the son of the late Billy Graham. He's an evangelist as well. And he was going to the UK, is going to the UK, to do a series of different events throughout the UK, just sharing the gospel at these different events like he does here in the United States and around the world. But he's having trouble getting venues.
Yeah, when I looked at this earlier, just before lunchtime, he had been dropped by all but one of the 8 venues he was originally scheduled to go to. So first, the UK kicks out Chick-fil-A, which was a bad move, I promise you. It's great food. But now they're kicking out the gospel, basically.
Basically, yeah.
And all of this was pressure from these LGBTQ groups who said that Billy Graham's, the son of the late Billy Graham, was labeled a homophobic hate preacher by the Liverpool Labor Network, LGBT network. And so there's just a redefinition of terms. They've taken homophobic, which means an irrational fear of homosexuals. He doesn't have that.
No.
They've called him a hate preacher. Rather than trying to preach the good news, they think the good news is actually hate. So they're taking all of these terms and turning them on their heads.
They went on to say they're worried that his appearance might incite hateful mobilization and risk the security of our LGBTQ community.
Yeah, remember the last time there was like
what?
a stadium rally and he spoke, Franklin Graham spoke, and then like pandemonium in the streets and mobs and burning cars.
Yeah.
You guys remember?
Never happened.
My goodness. Yeah, it's always this attack. If you don't agree with them, you are homophobic, you are a hater.
Yeah.
You know, they don't attack the argument, they attack the person.
They don't give any
you know?
examples of
No.
when Franklin Graham has spoken and all of a sudden the health and safety of a particular community was at risk. They don't give any examples because there aren't any examples.
No.
Because there's an irrational argument. It's just a scare tactic to try and make Christians look like they're people who are running around stirring everyone up to go in and incite violence and hate, which is completely inaccurate.
Yeah, and the great thing
about the
about
gospel.
his response, as he wrote a letter to the LGBT community in the UK, he actually shares the gospel clearly in that response. So just another example of his heart and his desire to communicate the gospel that Jesus Christ is the way of salvation for all sinners, regardless of what sexual identity you claim or anything.
And he says, I'm not coming out of hate, I'm coming out of love.
Yeah.
So that's
It's love that speaks up and says,
Right.
you are a sinner
And
in
tells the
rebellion against your
truth.
Creator, repent, and be converted that your sins might be blotted out. That's the loving thing to do,
Yeah.
is to share the gospel. This little bug
salvation.
here is now on my microphone. I'm going to tell him to go away. Goodbye. No more guests on the show.
So no surprise guests anyway.
Yeah. So speaking of bugs, the next one, this one's really cool. Scientists find living cells beneath scales of butterfly wings.
Actually, Avery, that was a true bug in the order Hemiptera. These are not bugs, these are lepidopterans. They're quite different.
You just wrecked my transition, Roger. Here I am trying to do these nice
Arthropods.
smooth transitions, and then Mr. Science over here. Apparently, if you have a biology teacher sitting next to you, can't use bug in the colloquial sense. You
All
have
right,
to
I'll
do
let it go. I'll let it go.
So back to butterfly wings. So I'm never going to look at butterfly wings the same way again now. This was
Yeah.
really cool. So the article starts by saying, butterfly wings aren't simply lifeless canvases for color signaling. So of course, when we look at butterfly wings, we typically think of the beautiful colors that we see on there, and often think of them as sort of like just dead material, the dead scales, like
You've probably
hair,
all seen a
fingernails.
butterfly with its wings kind of mutilated, and it still looks like it's doing fine. It's not going to lose any major body function because that might not be able to fly as well. Yeah, but it's basically dead chitin material, that same material we talked about earlier, and it's the colors even don't typically come from pigments, but from the way that the different scales lay and their refractive properties and how they're scattering light. It's just amazing the way a square millimeter of a butterfly wing is so complex, and it's an awesome
And
display of God's
now
glory.
it's even more complex than we thought it was
because
when-
underneath all
Yeah.
those,
underneath
You're gonna
they
have
have
a
a
lot of-
whole network of living cells that actually help to keep the butterfly's wings from overheating or rapidly cooling depending on the temperature outside. And these cells are able to sense where the sun is and temperature and things like that without them having to use their eyes or anything else to figure out temperature and intensity of the sun. So it's crazy how much is going on in just those little tiny butterfly wings that we never even knew was there.
Yeah.
And they have to have, of course, because you have living cells, now you have to have systems to support living cells. So it's not just these sort of dead cells that they thought it was. It's this entire complex system.
It's beautiful, the design that
Yeah.
God creates and shows how much we don't know.
Yep.
So it's just amazing to see that God is so, the way that God put everything to work, it amazes us.
Yeah, and one of the ways the scientists are talking about taking this idea and studying it further and then imitating it in our technology and things is to provide some type of cooling system, adaptive cooling system. So here, again, we're taking the master designer's work and we're imitating it and putting it into new functions.
Yeah.
When you look at something this complex, like you're not looking at random chance over millions of years. It's so obvious that there is a creator and his fingerprint is in this. Even in something as tiny and small and seemingly insignificant as a butterfly wing, you really are seeing the handiwork of the creator. And that's why Romans 1 says you are without excuse if you don't acknowledge the creator, because it's so obvious from what he has made that he exists.
And none of those features are there in the caterpillar before it goes
Right,
through the
yep.
metamorphosis. So there has to be an entire change in body plan and structure.
That
and
alone,
just-
the caterpillar to the butterfly is just like mind-blowing how amazing that whole
It
process is. Just God's creativity is endless, no matter where you look.
Absolutely.
So moving on from butterflies to paper wasps.
order Hymenoptera.
Order Hymenoptera.
Those are the ones that I
So
study.
people
You did,
probably
yes.
know less about paper wasps than they do butterflies. Probably not quite as familiar with them. But this is talking about the northern paper wasps specifically. And apparently, these scientists, based on the study they did, believe that they're able to recognize each other's faces, which is not a very common trait in the insect world to be able to recognize faces. Only some bees and other wasps, sort of the social insects, are able to do that. But now they found these northern paper wasps may be able to, and they think that this has rapidly evolved this ability just in the last couple thousand years.
And when I read all of these things, it just made me stop and ask, how can you know that is true? They're looking at the wasps and their ability to interact with one another and trying to correlate that with the structure of their DNA sequence and all of those things. And even in the article, it makes a very strong claim. Now, new research has shown that this ability evolved rapidly within just the last few thousand years. How can you know? I developed this little framework years ago to help people kind of think through these issues. I call it the Ask Good Questions framework, ASK. What's their authority? Is this somebody who's studied the topic and knows it well? What's their starting point? Are they coming from a biblical worldview or from a fully evolutionary materialistic worldview or some mix of that? And how do they know, what they claim to know? And this is one of the spots where I'd have to throw my flag and say, you can't know these things by what you're examining here. You can make some claims about them and say this might be true, but you're never going to be able to know how these behaviors developed and adapted and all of those features. So there's a series of articles on the website that if you want to check those out, that's kind of what I do when I go through these news articles. I work through those questions and think through those claims. So if you want to improve your skills at that, those articles would help you deal with those things.
Yeah, it's very important for us to see that sometimes they use the word evolved and evolution using different meanings. So here, for example, in one paragraph, they use 3 times, and they use different meanings for those words. Sometimes they use like changing, and the other time they use the idea of the evolutionary from molecules to man. So it's just, we need, which is called equivocation fallacy. So we need to be attentive to things like that, because they're trying to use different words, the same word having different meaning to kind of make their point. And that's something that we have to be paying attention.
Be able to recognize those things as we're reading.
Yeah.
The article closes up by saying, there are mutations happening that cause big shifts. This suggests the possibility that rapid adaptation of cognitive ability could have been important in other species as well, like language in humans. So of course, they're trying to compare the adaptive mutations that are happening and natural selection. We don't disagree with all of that. We can study that. But then to take that, like Gabby was saying, from that form and then say, this is how language might have evolved in humans, you're taking a huge leap. That's a leap too far, and a leap that we can't let them take.
Makes sense they saying that, because they also say the really surprising conclusion here is that the most intense selection pressures in the recent history of these wasps has not been dealing with climate, catching food or parasites, but getting better at dealing with each other. That's pretty profound.
It is. So again, we've got a great resource from Dr. Jeanson that deals with these things, rapid speciation and other ideas, natural selection in the books here. This version is the full treatment, Replacing Darwin, and then this is Replacing Darwin Made Simple. Great resources for you to get a hold of and help you understand those ideas more fully.
One of our regular viewers, Carrie, said she now has a stink bug just outside her window. It's the first one she's seen in months. So I guess they must be fans of the show. They're coming out to watch the show.
Chris on Ken's page asked if some of these insects have wings, why wouldn't they have been created on day 5 rather than day 6? That's actually a great question. We've got an article on the website that addresses that. We can't say for certain. If we think about a creature like a butterfly, did God create it as a butterfly or as the caterpillar or both simultaneously? So does that make it a land crawling animal or does it make a flying one? And so those different things, those are debates we can have, but we can trust surely that either on day 5 or 6, God created those.
All right, this next one comes from Science. Brazil's pick of a creationist to lead its higher education agency rattles scientists. So this is coming, of course, out of Gabby's home country, Brazil, talking about an individual who was placed as sort of to oversee Brazil's graduate studies program. I'm going to let you pronounce his name.
Benedito Guimarães Aguiar Neto.
Sure. There's an O on the end. Where did the O go?
Yeah.
Oh. All right. So this gentleman's been appointed into this government role. Unlike in America, where we have had this separation for a long time. In Brazil, that hasn't always been the case, and it's been increasing as the evangelical base grows there. And this is a situation where this is how different countries are going to approach these things in totally different ways. In America, we think back to the Dover case and the way intelligent design was thrown out of any type of public school by that court ruling. But the intelligent design movement that we often talk about is different in Brazil. You want to explain some of those differences?
Yeah, the way that the movement here, it's a little bit different in Brazil. They have been together not for a long time, and most of them are Christian, and they when they have the chance, they also share about their faith with no problem. So I think that's one of the main points.
It's more biblically grounded than intelligent
are.
design here, which
Yes.
is very nebulous.
Yeah.
There's a creator.
There's a
kind of.
creator.
Right, yeah. I'm not saying that it's not like that too, but they're a little bit more open to talk about their faith, and they're more biblical on that. One point that I thought it was interesting, it was because a professor from the university in São Paulo, he says that it's completely illogical to place someone who has promoted actions contrary to the scientific consensus. The first thing is how someone that believes that everything is material can actually account for logic. Because
Right,
logic,
yes.
it's not material.
And they start out saying the encroachment of religion on science
Yep.
and education policy.
That
They already have a
happens
religious
every-
view,
yeah.
Yeah.
and they're imposing that religious view on their scientific exploits. And so we want to do that from a Christian perspective. We want to honor God and bring Him into the picture,
Right.
give Him credit as the designer. And that's bad.
The creator,
But
yeah.
if we say nothing caused all these things, that's good.
It's just also a religious viewpoint.
Yes.
Yes, it is,
And-
because
Different religious viewpoint.
they cannot prove that, and they use the scientific consensus, which it's also a fallacy because
Might,
it's not because
might
it's the
doesn't
con-
make you right.
Yeah.
Most people don't make
yeah,
us right.
Right.
It's
Yeah.
not because it's a consensus that it's true.
There have been lots of
So-
ideas throughout history that were the
Oh
consensus,
yeah,
and they were very
and
wrong.
They're very wrong. They're very bad. So that's the point here, and it was funny because when I was talking to Ken about that, he said there is a law in the universe that people that believe in creation cannot say anything. Like we need to be, like if you are a scientist, you need to be quiet and not say anything, and just go with them with everything they believe. So that's one of.
I think we're going to make it through all our articles today
think
if we
we
can hustle
will
through
get
this
through
one.
this last one. It's a sad one to end on. It's a very
Jarring.
yes. Okay. So we'll jump in here. Unborn babies may feel pain before the 24-week abortion limit, scientists say. So they've been saying for years and years, before 24 weeks, babies can't feel any pain. They're not feeling an abortion. They can't feel any pain. So no worries. Well, not the case. So these scientists, including one who was very adamant babies could not feel pain, have done a study and found that actually their brains might be well enough developed at 13 weeks to start feeling something like pain is what they call it. And by 18 weeks, definitely feeling pain. And
This created some moral conundrum for them.
yes, now
But
they're like, this flirts with moral recklessness, not because, we're killing babies, but
'Cause
we're
they have
killing them
pain.
without anesthesia. So we should at least give them some kind of anesthesia before we kill them.
Here's the conclusion. It's okay to kill people, humans, as long as it doesn't hurt.
That's
And
literally their
that
conclusion.
resolves their moral conundrum.
Yeah, as long as it doesn't
Yeah,
hurt them.
As long as it doesn't
you
hurt,
can
it's
kill 'em.
okay to
It's
kill
fine.
people. And that's the only conclusion that you can calm down.
Yeah.
Yeah, she's pregnant. So,
This just
yeah.
it made me
As
so angry because
Christian.
it really just highlights
Yeah.
it really highlights that it's a heart issue because
Yeah.
these scientists, they're studying, they know these are babies.
Right.
There's no question here. They call them fetuses throughout the article, but they know they're talking about babies. You don't talk about how
Humans.
your kidney might feel pain and you should give your kidney some anesthesia before you remove your kidney, right?
No.
Like they know they're talking about humans, about babies. They don't care. They still think a woman should be allowed to kill her baby, but the baby probably shouldn't feel pain. That's probably a step too far, so we should give the baby some anesthesia before you rip the baby limb from the mother's womb.
And
Or
unless-
burn
yeah.
the
It just-
baby.
yeah.
Burn 'em.
In a
Unless
chemical
you see
process.
these dear ones as image bearers of God
Yeah.
from the moment of fertilization on, that's the only worldview that's going to give you a consistent, substantial view
To
that
protect them.
protects life. And then we got to carry that out of the womb into the world and into old age. All of those things need to
Absolutely.
be considered as we think about that.
Absolutely. So yeah, it really highlights how much it really is a heart issue and how hearts and minds need to be changed by the gospel, ultimately not by some kind of science. Like people would think, oh, if you can show that the baby feels pain, then that'll convince people abortion's wrong.
It hasn't.
No.
They would still
hasn't,
do it after
won't.
24 weeks anyway.
Well,
Yeah,
they have
yeah.
done to kids that it's already born, so why not?
So it really is a heart issue. We need to be praying for hearts and minds to be changed because of the gospel of Jesus Christ, which is one of the reasons we're building a Fearfully and Wonderfully Made exhibit here at the Creation Museum to highlight what God has created in the womb and to show that is someone who's made in the very image of God, and they deserve to be protected. And of course, the gospel will be highlighted throughout the exhibit to point people towards Jesus Christ and the forgiveness that he brings. So on that note, we will end the episode for today, and we'll be back. I may or may not be back depending on
We'll
what
see.
the baby does. We'll see next week for the next episode of Answers News. Thanks for watching.